So today we have UngJin, who is joining us from South Korea, and he will be talking on computational fluid dynamics. He is working as a PhD student in the Thermal Hydraulics and the Energy System Lab, or the System Lab as they call it.
So the main question is going to be, how can we circumvent the difficulty of solving the Navier Stokes equations? The Navier Stokes equations are designed to represent fluid behavior. So I clearly know that entropy is a measure for order and disorder of the system. So this is interesting because if the whole system is made of continuous material, then there's no order or disorder. So on the left side, you can see fluids behaving like particles behaving like fluids. On the other side, you see complete continuum. So it evolves according to set of rules based on the states of neighboring cells. So it doesn't really have to consider long-range interactions. It just has to consider small scale and short scale interactions. So Conway's game of life is a simulation for a set of cells. So the white ones on the screen are alive and the darker ones are dead. So it's pretty deterministic, right? And if you simulate more and more particles, then you can reproduce the mechanical waves that you can see in fluids. Boltzmann's equation represents gas behavior, but it tracks single molecule behavior, and it's composed of two parts. One part is the streaming part, which means the free propagation. The other part is collision part. Molecules would collapse into and collide against each other and transfer their momentum against each other, and they will propagate into space in the next step. So if you have 4 processors, and if you can subdivide the domain into 4 pieces, then you can get the advantage of accelerating the computation by 4 times. There are 2 different timescales in fluid behavior, because there is absolutely a timescale for macroscopic behavior, but also there must be timescale for each collision between particles, but it's highly unstable, so we should segregate its 2 phases. So on the red cells, it's high density cells. On the blue cells, it's low density cells. So these are pictures from like 2019 and 2020, and I had a great fortune to be allowed to live in the dormitory for international students.
That what is the analogy between Boltzmann and continuum with the wave-particle duality by de Broglie?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I would say you can refer to the local equilibrium hypothesis, because so just like wave particle duality, there's a limitation. So imagine you're studying wave particle duality. There's a limitation where you can see particle-like behavior or wave-like behavior. For the same reason, there must be particle-like behavior for fluids or continuum-like behavior for fluids. So what I want to suggest is there's a criterion for determining if it's more like particle or if it's more like fluid continuum. It's called local equilibrium hypothesis. So imagine you have a set of if you have a domain, cube volume filled with fluid, and if you have to subtract some part of it, and you have to decide if it's more like particle or more like continuum, just like in the same principle. You can decide it by the perturbation, the magnitude of perturbation divided by the number of molecules. That's how we can do it. So for example, for typical air get no like typical air, uh, for each cube size of one micrometer at each side, it still works like continuum. But below that, when it comes to submicron length, then it's going to work like particles. I think I I hope this can be an answer partly to your question. Thank you for coming. Like I see some names of my friends. Like I should say hi to Steffi and Jinho, like my friends. Apparently, lot of other my friends are busy these days, so they couldn't participate. But I deeply felt it's a great pleasure to give this webinar, and I really should say thank you again for inviting me to this session. Thank you.
Over here, we bring real researchers who do the research themselves to make you aware about where the world is progressing. And in this entire process, give a little more recognition to the researcher, something that is very much lacking in these days.